This is a pager. Specifically, it's an alphanumeric pager, which means it can receive not just numeric messages, but messages composed of most ordinary characters that you would find in a alphanumeric text message. Now that begs the question, how do you send an alphanumeric page, such as this, to an alphanumeric pager? Now, most consumers are probably familiar with being able to call the actual 10-digit number associated with a pager and being able to use the touch-tone keypad to leave a numeric message. But that doesn't provide any provision for sending a message like this one. So, how do you do that? Well, this is one of your options. This is a Motorola AlphaMate II, and this is a paging terminal that uses the Telelocator Alphanumeric Protocol, or TAP. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as TAP/IXO, TAP/IXO. And this is a device that was specifically designed for generally businesses to send pages to their employees or anyone that they needed to page. So not typically something that consumers would be using directly, but this is something capable of sending such an alphanumeric page, as you might guess by the keyboard. Now at its surface, this looks kind of similar to a TDD. For reference, here is a TDD. You can see that they both have a fairly complete keyboard, at least as far as the letters go. And they both have a single row display with a limited number of columns. So I have this hooked up to a speaker so that we can hear what the phone line is doing when this device is in use. And just before I turn it on briefly, you can see that at the top we have a number of special function keys that are specific to paging functions, like paging directory, page to send a page, status to view the page status, page setup, stuff like that. I'll briefly show you the back here. You can see the telephone line coming in. Like a TDD, you could also parallel a telephone off this. And you have a serial and parallel port for the printer if you wanted to either send this to something that was logging or printing the pages you were sending or something like that. Now, I'll also mention that this is the Motorola AlphaMate II. There is a slightly newer one called the Motorola AlphaMate 250, which is very similar, except it's missing the parallel port. And that is actually still being serviced and refurbished by a company even today. So these devices go back to the early to mid 90s, I want to say. The protocol actually dates to the late 80s. But some businesses are still using these today, and the underlying protocol is still supported by paging companies like Spok. You can actually use one of these to send a page to a commercial paging customer. So let's go ahead and turn this on. And it just briefly checked for dial tone when I turn that on. And you'll see the copyright is 1993, so that's when this came out. This is 33 years old now. But it still keeps pretty good time. This has been powered off for a while, but it has the correct date. The time is slightly off, but I'm not going to fault it too much for that. And at this point, this is the main screen. It is ready to go. It says select operation. So I'll just briefly show a few things here. So actually, no, I don't want to do status. If we do setup, you can configure different aspects of the device, like if you want it password protected, you want to configure the printer. I'll go into the system directory, which shows you the different paging providers that are set up. It shows that there are 10 entries in here. So if we view I'm just going to press enter so we can page through them all. So here we have a paging provider called Interlinked. So what this is I've actually written some software that acts as the server end of a TAP connection. So think of this as the client. It's going to use the TAP protocol to send the page to something that is going to need to receive the page. Now, in the case of a provider like Spok, they would receive the page and then send it out via RF on the air so that your pager can actually get it. What I've done is written some software that can receive the page and then either relay it out using TAP or maybe some other protocol like simple network paging protocol or even email. So providers like Spok do support TAP, but they also support, more modern internet-based protocols like SNPP or SMTP. Or you could do something else with it completely, like run a program or something. So I'll demonstrate both functions here. The next provider in here is actually Spok. So if I wanted to directly send a page via Spok's paging terminal, that is their actual number that you would use. And you can see the modem settings as well. We're using 300 baud, 7 data bits, 1 stop bit, even parity. So that's pretty standard across all TAP endpoints. All right, so let's go ahead and send a page. To do that, we press page. And it's going to say enter the name or number. Now, the TAP protocol itself does not require that your paging endpoints have telephone numbers or be telephone numbers. They could be names or other aliases. It's quite flexible. Now, typically for pagers like this one, they have an actual 10-digit phone number that you could send to. In this case, I'm going to send a page to this number here, which I've set up as a number on one of my systems, which will receive the page, in this case via TAP, and then it will use SNPP to send the page to the actual pager at Spok. So this will be a two-prong operation. Now, it asks me to select the provider, or confirm the provider. This is the correct provider, but unlike with email where you have a way of looking up the email server, or with telephone calls you can look up the carrier using an LRN lookup, there is no centralized directory with paging. You have to store the paging provider for every pager number that you might want to page to. You have to know who their provider is. There's no central way to look that up. Now, typically a company might have a bunch of pagers for its employees through one provider, in which case they only need to program in that one provider. But if you are just trying to page all of your friends and they are using various paging companies, you're going to need to keep track of their providers and store them all in here and select the correct provider. So I've done that, and I'm going to enter the message. So I will say, this is a test page via TAP. All right, and I'll press enter, and now you will hear the device pick up the phone line and actually send the page using the TAP protocol. So that was a fairly short page, so it didn't take very long. Obviously, the longer the page, the longer it's going to take. And here we are. Alright, so we sent a message to an actual pager, first using the TAP protocol, and then using SNPP from my software to actually deliver it to Spok. We could have sent that directly using TAP, but that just demonstrates that there's multiple protocols that can be used. Now, to do something slightly different, right, we don't need to send pages to an actual pager. We could do something else with them. So I'm going to send another page to a different number, which behaves differently. And again, I will use the same system, but on the software side, it's programmed to do something different with messages to that particular number. Alright, so this is another test page sent via TAP. And what will happen here is that the page will be shown on some IP phones that I have sitting around here. So we're going to go ahead and send that. And there we go. This is another test page sent via TAP. And the way that this works is that with Polycom IP phones, you can basically do push alerts to display messages on the phone. And that's what I'm doing here. Now, this demonstrates some of the interesting things that you can do with this. Effectively, what I use for my actual paging is I have paging numbers set up that will both display notifications on the IP phones as well as send pages to my actual physical pager. Sort of like how a mailing list can expand to multiple endpoints, or you can have a paging plan that does multiple different things. So that's all that I really want to demonstrate here. There's a lot more that these devices can do, but it would be kind of tedious to go through all the minutiae. So I will leave a link to the manual as well as the company that still services and refurbishes the newer version of this, the Motorola AlphaMate 250, as well as to the software for anyone that is interested in playing around with this further. Of course, you will need to get one of these, but that's only if you want to use the TAP protocol. There's other protocols that are supported as well. I mentioned SNPP earlier, the Simple Network Paging Protocol. Very similar to SMTP, which is what's used for email, but optimized for paging. And it's essentially a newer internet-based version of some of the things that TAP does with more features. Obviously, it's not modem-based, so it's much faster. But it carries over a lot of the concepts that originally originated with TAP back in the late 80s.